Why is the world repeatedly conquered? 700 years after Mongolia, the true history of the power that dominated the world. Have you ever thought about this? Why has human history continuously flowed into the competition of who rules the world? Even if an ancient empire falls, another great power rises. A new order is established, and someone once again becomes the center of the world. The same was true after the fall of the Mongol Empire. The Ottoman Empire emerged, and the maritime empires of Europe connected the world. Britain dominated the seas, and later, the United States came to control the world order. However, what's surprising is that despite all these changes, the core principles that moved the world have not changed significantly. In the end, there were three things that moved history: total sea, Bada, and capital. Today, I will talk about how the world has moved over the past 700 years since Mongolia, focusing on these three keywords. 1.
Please like and subscribe to our channel.
The Mongol Empire was not just a simple conquering nation. When we usually think of the Mongol Empire, we imagine cavalry charging on horseback. However, the true power of the Mongol Empire was not just its military strength. It was connection. In the 13th century, Mongolia unified most of Eurasia under one order. The Silk Road, which connects China to Europe, became stabilized. Merchants, engineers, diplomats, and religious figures began to move across the vast space. At that time, the world began to connect like a single network for the first time. Even the Black Death moved along this network. This shows how the Mongol Empire created a massive integrated structure. The problem is that this structure was too massive. The Mongol Empire eventually fragmented, and each region began to split into independent powers. However, what is important here is that the collapse of the Mongols did not mean a disconnection of the world. Rather, people remember the possibilities of connection that the Mongols created. And then, the numerous empires that emerged afterward pondered how to reconnect and dominate the world. In other words, the history after the Mongols marked the beginning of a new competition for hegemony. 2. The last conqueror, Timur, is the first great conqueror to appear after the Mongols. This is Timur, what we commonly refer to as the Timurid Empire. Timur considered himself the successor of the Mongols. His army moved at an incredible speed, employed terror tactics, and swept across vast territories with cavalry-centered strategies. They attacked Persia, Central Asia, northern India, and even the Ottoman Empire. By the standards of the time, he was almost a superhuman conqueror. But something strange happens. This enormous empire did not last long. What could be the reason? Although they succeeded in conquest, they failed in maintenance. The Mongol Empire was not just good at fighting. They established trade networks, built an administrative system, and integrated various ethnicities and religions. However, Timur's conquests were excessively militaristic. In other words, while the destructive power was strong, the structural maintenance was weak. This is a very important point in history. An empire does not simply remain strong. Structures of connection, administration, economy, and legitimacy must work together to survive for a long time. 3. Guns begin to change the world. After the 15th century, history faces yet another massive change. This is the era of gunpowder and firearms. Countries that emerged during this period are commonly referred to as gunpowder empires. Notable examples include the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Mughal Empire. Until then, medieval castle walls were almost invincible. However, with the advent of cannons, the situation changed completely. A representative event is the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The Ottoman Empire uses massive cannons to bring down the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. A city that has stood for over 1,000 years has fallen. This is not just a simple war. It is the moment when military technology changed the world order. After that, countries will require more taxes and administrative systems to maintain stronger armies. In other words, a gun is not just a simple weapon, but a device that creates a strong nation. And in this process, the empire becomes increasingly organized. The center of the world shifts from land to sea. However, Europe makes a very important directional change here. It has started to move towards the sea, not the land. Portugal and Spain were the first to set sail, followed by the Netherlands and England. From this point on, the center of the world shifts from the overland Silk Road to maritime networks. Think about it, everyone. The ocean is not just a simple waterway. Trade, military, information, jungbo, the flow of finance, colonies, and resources, all begin to connect through the sea. In particular, Portugal disrupted the existing trade networks of Islamic merchants while pioneering the sea route to India. And Spain secured vast amounts of silver in the Americas. And Britain takes it a step further here. Britain did not simply conquer territory. They have begun to control the very flow of the world. They have seized the shipping routes, maintained naval power, developed the financial system, and established trade networks. In other words, they have become the center of the global economy. From this point on, the empire becomes not just a vast land, but a huge network. Now, capital dominates the world. After the 19th century, another change emerges. It is the Industrial Revolution. From this point on, the center of the world begins to shift not only to military power but also to productive power. With the emergence of railroads, steamships, telegraphs, banks, insurance, and corporations, the world becomes connected in a completely different way than before. In particular, Britain was the country that best took advantage of this trend. At that time, London was the center of global finance, and the pound was the key currency for international payments. The UK was able to exert economic influence, even without directly ruling over the entire world. And this is where the modern concept of invisible domination emerges. In the past, the military came and occupied. But now, control has become possible through an economic dependency structure. This is a very important change, because the modern world is also operating on this structure. 6. Why do empires eventually collapse? What's interesting is that even the empires that were so powerful eventually declined. Mongolia, the Ottoman Empire, and the British Empire all eventually faltered. Gyeolgujeon Huntaliaobnida. Why is that? It's because the maintenance costs increase exponentially as empires grow. You have to maintain the military, run the administration, suppress rebellions, and the economic burden also increases. And over time, the subjugated regions begin to learn. They acquire skills, nationalism grows, and independence movements emerge. In other words, the empire begins to weaken because of the connections it has created. This is a very ironic scene that repeats in history. So, what about modern times? Many people believe that imperialism has come to an end. But is that really the case? Even today, the world still operates around great powers. It's just that the methods have changed. In the past, the military came in directly. But now, finance, technology, semiconductors, AI, platforms, and information networks hold power. If Britain once ruled the seas, today, the great powers dominate networks. The dollar system, international financial systems, internet platforms, and global supply chains are all part of the modern new seas. And the rise of China can also be understood within this context. China is not just an economic power, but a country that is moving to create a new order. Ultimately, world history continues to unfold even now. It has merely changed its form. In conclusion, we often think of empires as relics of the past. However, if we look closely at history, empires have never completely disappeared. The Mongols created connections. The gunpowder empires brought military innovations. The maritime empires connected the world through the seas, and the modern empires moved the world with capital. And today, the world is being reshaped on the foundations of technology and information networks. In the end, history repeats itself. Only the methods of domination evolve.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel.